Welcome to the Be Dadly Podcast, where we discuss all things dadly, from being an entrepreneur while caring for toddlers, to raising screenagers and talking the birds and the bees. We're here to help you traverse the vast and dynamic landscape of fatherhood. Enjoy practical advice, lots of puns, and even a few heart-touching moments.
And the dad jokes are pretty good too.
And now your host, Brandon Jones.
I am really excited about Jon Prophet here. He's a buddy of mine, become a close friend of mine recently. And one of the things is I think of you, Jon. I got to tell the listeners this. I think of you as like one of the coolest dad archetypes. Like if I had a dad, I wish it was you, because you really do have. You're like this musician. You're a creator. You got all this creativity. You video produce. You've got this really amazing background. You've traveled all over the world. You have a lot of intention with community, with health, in the way that you parent. Yeah. You just have so much intention. I feel like you bring a lot of care to everything that you do, and you're a total badass. Like you literally are just a really badass guy. And I think to myself, like, dude, as a kid, that would be so epic. Like. And I had a great dad, but you are a really cool guy. And I remember telling Miles, my man, you got a really cool dad. I don't know if you know that. Your dad is super, super cool.
That's awesome. I appreciate that, man. Well, I try to be the dad that I wished I would have had. You know?
I think you might be doing that.
And I think, but I'm also just this eclectic mess of curiosity and interest. And so I guess I wish I had a father figure who would have helped nurture that. My father introduced me, I think, to certain things that I carry with me today that I really appreciate. Hunting, for one, which was really great. Fishing, which also was attempted to be introduced to me early, way too early, by my grandfather, who was also a really, really epic authority figure to me, a mentor to me, left too early. But in spite of not really having, so my background, I guess it's good to just sort of give a little background.
Yeah, please do.
So mostly raised by my mom. My father was around, and they got divorced at I think when I was 10. And but his job basically had him traveling on the road all the time. So basically not having a father. And, by the time I would see him on weekends or whatever, and I remember just like wanting to spend time with him and him just being so preoccupied. I remember doing that thing where you grab onto their ankles where they're going out the door because he's got to go on a road trip, and having them drag and like, I gotta go. And just feeling that and I remember at some point just stopped trying. I just stopped trying to connect with him. And so by the time they got divorced, I was already over it. You know what I mean? It was like, wow, you're not around here anyway. So it was a really challenging time, and I fortunately had a lot of, some not so great, but men would kind of come and go in my mom's life in her attempts to find another partner. And then we had a big house. It was very much like the Forrest Gump house, like too big for us at the time, because it was just me and her. And so she rented it out. And so these other figures would come in as like aunties and uncles and big brothers and that kind of thing. And so I remember a guy named Frenchie, who was just this really great kind of flamboyant dude who we would hang out and watch Grizzly Adams together, and he would cook with my mom. He was like my mom's best friend, and just a great figure. Taught me a lot about I remember I was squirting one of those mud dauber sort of bird nests. You know, they make this little mud nest in the corner. And I was squirting
swallow,
it.
I think it
Swallow, is. Yeah. And I was squirting it with a squirt gun, and he fucking railed me. He got into me. And I'd never see him do that. I've never experienced that. But it was really potent, because the way he communicated that, the sort of douchebaggery engaged in that sort of behavior, which, kids engaged in. It's just kind of part of this, especially boys. It was really landed, and I was really mindful of that. And that's not to say I didn't still shoot things or whatever occasionally, but it sat with me. So I remember, shooting a beautiful cardinal when I was a teenager with my pellet gun and thinking, what a great shot, just way out there, and bam, he drops, and I go out there and I pick him up, and I just feel like the biggest asshole, because I'm not eating the thing,
Right,
it was just a waste. It was just waste, so it was these little nuggets that just get planted early, which I try to do with my son. I'm I know I'm speaking over his cognitive ability sometimes. But I know that these are little seeds that I'm planting that will sprout through his own awareness and his own experience. And to me, like, that's the biggest thing, is like, the more broad your reference points in life, the more access you have to react or to move and adapt to a life situation that may be challenging. Whereas if you've been, bubble boy your whole life, and these things, these diverse experiences kind of come out of the woodwork and blindside you, you just don't have a reference point for them. You don't even know where to begin, and I think that's what I'm trying to imbue with, like, I'm almost 50. I'll be 50 here in a couple of weeks. And much of my wisdom is hard won. It's like I just had to bash my head against the wall and figure the lesson out. But I was always a very curious and astute learner. And so, like, I literally hired my own mentor at age 15, this guy who was an ex-Navy SEAL, named Bill Monroe. Very fascinating character. I was taking, like, basically land navigation, urban survival classes in high school.
Wow.
I would take these college classes that were available, that you didn't need to be, like, you could take as extracurricular or whatever. Right. And so I went to this guy's class, and I was like, this guy's fascinating. He wants to, because, like, as a kid, it's funny, like, we would have career days, and all these, my peers just had no idea what they were going to be. And I knew at that age, for whatever reason, I wanted to be special forces. So I was hell-bent on military. It's funny because, like, now I'm an artist, and I've been an artist for, 30 years. But I wanted to go in the military. And so when, other kids have, like, Motley Crue on their wall or Heather Locklear, I had, like, Navy SEALs from Soldier of Fortune magazine in, like, full, regalia in the swamp with, like, M16s and the whole thing. Like, that was, or ninjas, something like that. So that kind of tells you where my head was. And I had a bag full of weapons that I either made or procured, and actually sold throwing stars. So this goes to the theme of entrepreneurship. I started selling throwing stars in my junior high school. They weren't very sharp. That was the guys who would buy them would give me shit. He's like, this isn't even sharp. I'm like, fuck you, you sharpen it, man. But I would get them, like, I had this place, I'd get them for cheap, and then I'd sell them, at the junior high. It wasn't even high school, it was junior high. Entrepreneurship, buy low, sell high. And but I was just really into that, and, like, conflict and battle and warrior stuff, and I would learn these sort of ninja things from my ninja magazine, just, like, wherever I could get the information, and then go to the football field at my high school and, like, with my friends and practice these techniques, and all this stuff. And then I hired Bill, and he started working with me, and it really, to have that level, I mean, he was like an ex-vet, like, he had stories from Vietnam that were incredible. And so as a 15-year-old, he's turned me on to, books like Behold a Pale Horse from William Cooper, just these reference points, again, going back to that like, as a 15-year-old, were pivotal to my consciousness and my awareness, and that kept blossoming, and the awarenesses and these experiences that he would share of his own life and his own trials and tribulations, and then seeing him as a human, and seeing his, his daughter, and seeing how he parented his child, and all the squirrely stuff in that, and just being like, I don't know if I'd want you as a dad. I appreciate your mentorship. I don't know if I'd want you as a dad. So it's been interesting because, like, there's also this dynamic with the male and trying to develop healthy relationships with other males, which is a whole other thing, right? And so, my mom was the authority figure, and at age 10, my brother was born. So I had another brother. Again, father's out of the picture. And then I had a year later, another brother, so I basically became this father figure for my brothers. And so all through my much of my teenage years, when I wasn't, like, at work or, working with Bill or whatever, there was a lot of time where I was basically surrogate father, oldest brother, but also holding emotional space for my mother. And that created a lot of gravity in me. And the beauty and the takeaway of that is this I'm very self-referential. I don't seek I play things close to the chest, as they say. I don't really seek the advice of other people, unless it's merit-based, unless I really know, like, you're somebody who I would come to and ask for advice because you have a teenager. Like, I have a 6-year-old, right? You have a teenager. So there's, terrain that you've already traversed that I may be able to learn from, and I do, just listening to you. I'm like, oh, okay, that's coming. Just be prepared for that. But in some ways, I kind of did that. And that's why it took me until I was in my 40s to even consider having a kid, because I was like, I feel like I've done this. Like, I was already changing diapers and bottle feeding and getting up in the middle of the night and doing all this. Like, fuck that. So I spent, like, from my 20s until my 40s, basically, like, recapturing my youth. Like, I'm not taking responsibility for shit, barely myself, even though I was, like, married for 6 years, but she was kind of the same way. And so we just were in a band, together, and I put out records, I was touring, I was doing something music related to sort of sustain myself that whole time. And then I got into film later on and started doing that kind of work, and that took me around the world. So it took me a long time to finally come to the awareness or the realization. And I was with a lot of women who wanted to do that. And I could feel, they would communicate very clearly, like this was on their horizon. This was what they wanted. And I didn't feel it at the time. I didn't feel it with my ex-wife. I didn't feel it with these, subsequent girlfriends, even though we were in longer term relationships. I was just like, nah, I didn't think I was going to feel it, really. I'm still in play mode. Like, I want to travel. And like, so if somebody was down for that, like one of my great girlfriends, who ended up, moving on and I've always been able to, for the most part, manage really good post-relationship dynamics with my exes, and like leave in a just an awareness, like we're not on the same page about these things, and like I want you to have what you want, but I'm not the guy to give that to you right now, and so God bless you, and I support you in that, and but we were in rock, like my ex Wendy and I were in rock bands, in this rock band together that I had put together. And it was amazing. We had a great time. We had just like the most amazing thing. And then when it got kind of the point where she was like, and I want to do this thing, and I'm like, and she's like, I want to see if, like, are you going to be there? Do you feel it? I'm like, I don't think I'm going to be there, So yeah, we moved on. And then the next one, kind of same thing, like travel, scuba dive. We got our scuba divers, certification together. We did all this great stuff. And then it was like, but I also want to do this thing. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not the guy for that. Like all this other stuff we're doing, I'm the guy for that, but I'm not this other thing. But I was also mindful, like I have a low tolerance for, and this is going to sound, kind of judgmental, but whatever, deal with it. Like, I have a low tolerance for crazy, and I think to some degree, like my mom instilled that in me, in that she taught me by her example of like putting herself in situations where, as a single mom, here comes this man who wants to take care of her, who's like, oh, I know you don't love me like that in that intimacy way. But I just want to take care of you and the kids. I just love you. And it's cool if we don't go there, and of course then moving into it and then realizing all these energetic shifts in the man. And suddenly he's all up in the grill and trying to tell me and the boys how to live. And, and it's like, you haven't earned that right yet, man, and so then it's like marriage annulment. And then the next guy comes this guy named Paul, God bless him. He's fantastic influence, super just righteous dude, like very morally. And so he was a great influence, but same thing, like he wanted to be our dad, and take care of her, but she didn't. She loved him as a friend, but not as a intimate partner. And she had the wherewithal to say, even her desperate position as a single mom, like trying to raise these 3 kids and, that want hardly anything in terms of child support or any of this stuff. Like just being willing to say, no, like I can't do that. It's not true. There's not an integrity. So there's a lot of things that she did, I'm sure without her conscious awareness, that I just thought, no, I'm not doing that. Like I'm not going to pretend this is true for me. Like this is what's actually true. Take it or leave it, I'm not gonna. So I didn't have that like a lot of the other, guests. We've listened to these podcasts of like that people pleaser thing. I was just like, nah, fuck them.
So you're kind of the reluctant dad.
Well, yeah, but by the time, this is the great story, and this is like also be careful what you wished for. I was super intentional about bringing Miles into the world. So I was living in Mexico at the time, and I had just been on this whirlwind tour, living in Australia, living in like 3 or 4 different states. Like I'd just been moving around a lot, very nomadic. And I moved down, I was living in Missoula, then I moved down to Mexico. And I think I'd just done some kind of activity. Like I was just on this thing of like knocking off a lot of bucket list things. Mm-hmm. And I'd done the skydiving, which my father had always talked about but never did, mm-hmm. And so I was like, I'm going to do that, and I do it twice, and then, going to New Zealand, hiking over these mountains, in Thailand, doing these yoga teacher trainings, in India, doing yoga teacher trainings, like traveling on like, bamboo rafts and riding on elephants and tiger preserves and just like all this crazy shit, and diving with sharks. I think that might have been the thing. Like, I think I had just done a scuba dive with sharks, basically in Playa del Carmen on the coast there. And I was just like sitting in my room, and I'm thinking like the high wears off. It's kind of like as a performer, for me, it was like 1 in 5 shows gave you that like real high, where the audience and the vibe was just like fire, and you felt recharged. And I understand for people who are extroverts, that's why that becomes the drug. For me, I'm more of an introvert, so it's exhausting for me to go and be on stage. And so if I don't have that reciprocity, or if I'm just playing and people are in the just fucking eating lunch or whatever, like there's no juice there. Like it's just exhausting. It's an energetic output. There's nothing in return. So even when I do have a show, or I have had a show in the past where like the juice was thrown back at me, you have this high, you feel it. And then you're sitting there after the show and everybody goes to bed and and you're just like, no, like it's now the high's going away. Now I'm sitting here alone. Now, fortunately, like I like being alone.
Right.
Like I really enjoy my solitude, and especially if I'm out in nature and that sort of thing. But it was just like, so I was sitting there after this great experience, this bucket list experience of scuba diving with these beautiful animals. Like, what am I doing? Like, how much more can I just entertain myself? Like how many more of these little hits, dopamine hits can I get? I'm just like, it just felt empty. And I was kind of like, like, what's my next deal, God? Like, what am I doing? And it was like, you're going to have a son. And I'm just like, I guess that's the next thing, I'm going to have a son. I'm going to be a dad. That's the next adventure. And it has totally been the next adventure. And it's so confrontational as somebody who is like a shark, in that I feel like I need movement to breathe, And I've learned fairly recently that a lot of that is trauma induced, like that search for the hit, to need to feel on the edge of things all the time. Like if things seem very domestic and planned out,
you're like, I'm dying,
predictable, it's just like I want to just hang myself. Like,
you're like, it's over. My life's over. I'm sitting at home. The TV's on. It's a challenge too, because it's not that I want to dodge any of the father stuff. It's that I want to just take the dude and run, take the dude out on to the great adventures, and do all that. And I'm not really in the position to do that because his mother isn't the same way. She's not wired that way. And so I am having to find ways to transmute that energy, that is that wanting to flee energy, that wanting to be on the move energy, and what's the next adventure. And so the beauty of that is that I feel like I put that into him as a sense of, not in the unhealthy way, hopefully, but in that sense of like, life is an adventure. Like, this is the new adventure. This is, what adventure are we going to go on, and really kind of pushing that angle of not
not feeling like the world you exist in is the world. It is a world. And the world is at large is just this extraordinary, rich tapestry that you can explore and you can take many angles at, and you can learn so much from. So it's like this giant school, really. But it's also a giant playground, and it's also a giant battlefield. Like, it all depends on your perspective, right? And so I think one of the things that I try and really inculcate in him is this broad awareness, like the ability to step back and really look at things from a much broader perspective. So even if it's like putting him, sitting down with these different books, and showing pictures of like, African Kalahari Bushmen,
Right.
or these different animals, or, videos of these deep sea creatures, or just this whole awareness of like, these things are all out there happening right now, right as we're sitting in this room reading this story. In another part of the world, these things are happening, and you can access that. And one of the lessons that I kind of got was, and this is this sort of manifestation. Oh, I will say too, like, be careful what you ask for. So I remember saying sort of to myself, like, I just want to find a partner to procreate with, to have a child with, who will not drive me crazy should the intimate part of the relationship not work. Like, who's not going to make my life miserable.
So specific.
Very specific. And that's exactly what I have.
Like, this is all I need.
Yeah. I co-parent with his mother, really in a
It's a very high functioning, low intimate relationship.
Yeah. It's like, it's really amazing. And it's kind of weird to say, but we're sort of like many roles to each other, but very brother and sister at this point,
Right.
And it's beautiful, and because we have him as our center, because she wasn't into having a kid either. Like, that wasn't on her radar at all, and she would never change it now, But it took a lot of, from my side, it was a lot of like, let's do this, and her hormones would kick in and be like, yeah, no,
Right.
yeah, no,
Right.
And probably also just the way I showed up, I'm sure there was like, is he going to
like,
really show up?
He's all in. He's kind of half out.
Yeah,
He's
is he
all in.
really going to be here? Is he really going to do these things? So, that was a part of it too. But we found a really nice flow. And part of that is because we just put him so center. And we have both at this age, I mean, she had him when she was 46, right?
Right.
So we had both done so much work that we could come to each other, even though we had the resentment and the struggle and the things that came up in our relationship, that we could put those things aside for the sake of the kid, and really like try and remain civil as much as possible. And which I think we went to a mediator, and that the mediator was like, you guys are the most civil couple we have ever experienced in this office. Like, really quite amazed at what's happening right here.
Wow.
And even then we were just like kind of a little scowly at each other, but,
Right.
but I think we both could be aware that this was like a surface thing, that there was a deep love in there, but we had allowed things. And I think the takeaway, one of the lessons is, if you're going to have a kid, be conscientious about it as much as possible, right? Wait until you're really ready and willing, and that doesn't always happen. But also, when you do have the kid, like, you've got to make the time in the relationship for your relationship. Like, you have got to put, like, we did the thing of co-sleeping because we thought, of course we tried to crib train for like a second. It was a disaster, and we're like, fuck that. Not traumatizing our kid with this nonsense. And then, but the co-sleeping has this kid between you two. And it's like, if you don't carve out the time to like not have that kid between you.
Oh, yeah.
And we didn't have the supportive family. Like, they were all over the place. So we didn't have someone to just pawn him off on. We had a great nanny actually for a while, but we just didn't take full advantage of that for ourselves because neither of us had really good reference points for relationship. And that's the other thing to take away is, if you don't have good reference points for healthy relationships, fucking get them. Like, don't pretend you're going to go into this relationship, you're going to meet this person, it's all going to be magical and naturally going to work out and blah, blah, blah. No, it's not going to work out. Like, you've got to learn relationship skills. You've got to learn how to be that intimate with somebody and that raw and that open, and learn to trust yourself enough to know that you're making a good decision by bringing this other person into your world. It's like people who say, I have trust issues. It's like, well, you don't trust yourself. You haven't developed enough trust with yourself. So of course you're going to have trust issues. And then when you bring someone in, of course they're going to do all kinds of things that have betrayed your trust, because you don't know enough about yourself to trust yourself and your decision making. So it's like, I feel like almost every relationship I've ever had is just like, I have a positive attitude about, even though it didn't work out. I'm like, it's an opportunity for learning. Like, every one of them has leveled me up. They've been my teachers, whether wittingly or unwittingly. I've taken what I could, and integrated it as I could. And then when it didn't work, it didn't work. And I tried to, as best I could, in most of the situations, like, find the gold, sift for the gold. And then, like, let the rest go. There's nothing you can do about that. I mean, don't try and force the river.
Paint the picture for us of, because like this, you have very unique. It's not unique, but it's uncommon.
Yeah,
I shouldn't necessarily say unique, but it is uncommon to co-parent, cohabitate. You live in the same home.
Yeah, we cohabitate,
but you're separated.
Yeah.
Tell us.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's a strange word, but yeah, separate.
Well,
like, we're not intimate.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Tell us about that. What is that like? I mean, do you date?
Right. Yeah. Well, so we've set some parameters, and this is good because, I mean, who talks about this stuff? But I actually have one friend, Brian Puregrossi, who's a great coach. A little shout out to him, who's just a holistic, spiritual kind of guide, coach, mentor type guy. And I talked to him, and he actually did that with his son's mother too. He's like,
I did it for a year and a half with mine.
Right. Yeah, so it's like, it's a thing, and it was the same thing. He's like, yeah, dating was weird. and
we never got to that. I'll say this. We were living together. She was in a separate room 95% of the time. Every now and then we'd try to sleep together again. And, it's kind of going back and forth. Yeah. But, we never got to a point where we felt like separated enough that we could just go date.
Totally.
We're now living separately.
Yeah.
So we haven't even crossed that threshold. But I'm just saying we did live together, and we were not really together.
Well,
in many ways,
there
emotionally.
are lots of couples who are that way, right? It's like
you guys really are.
They're just not confronting it. We're totally.
Right, you're totally confronted, and you're totally open.
Totally
with the fact
platonic, and totally and just like support each other. I mean, and it's a juggle. Like there's a playing with it, like a sculpting to it, because it's like trying to find that emotional space and where the connections, the tethers still are or not, but we basically keep it out of the house.
Got it. So you date, but out of the house.
Out of the house. So we don't bring anybody home. We don't do any of that, and we just keep it all like outside of the world. And and that's only to say because it's too tight. Like our whole vision is about co-living in a communal environment.
So that's kind of where you see the next phase.
Right. I would have my own place, but we're on the same land, community. So our boy can basically walk from one house to the other. Right. For multiple reasons, but obviously the privacy.
So you guys could move to an apartment, but I'm just kidding. No. You would have to live in that.
But her room's like across from my room. Miles' room is right down the hallway. So it's very familial, and I think that was so important for me as a child of a single mom. I wanted a family unit, even if it doesn't look like the perfect family unit. I still wanted that cohesion, And I think about what's that telling him? Like, what lessons is he learning from that? And it's an evolving,
of course,
process, but he's like, she's dated other people, I've dated other people, he's interwoven with those families, and then come back, but I think he gets the sense of like the foundation is us. Like if somebody's going to come in as a problem, they're not going to stay very long. Right. So whoever comes in has to have the emotional resilience, the soul, the depth of soul, and the maturity to not have these like insecure kind of like, oh, I'm jealous because you're blah blah blah. Like I'm not playing any of that. Like we're adults, right? And I think I for a while was kind of living a polyamorous life, so I had already dealt with and it's not like it's done, but dealing with this idea of jealousy, like what is that really about for you? And some people think like that's just what you do, like jealousy is just part of the whole thing. And to me, I'm always looking at things like, how do you, like, these are lower vibrational feelings, in my opinion. Like they're detrimental feelings. They don't help at all.
Right.
So
they take an immense amount of energy.
Totally.
They require that you don't trust the other individual completely.
Right. And that your sense of self has to be validated by this other person's yes or no.
Right.
And that's the beauty of this term compersion. It's like this idea, compersion is really this idea that says, I am in love. And so I'm operating from this place of love. And if I love you, then I support you in you being in love, like in finding your joy, finding your bliss, and all of this kind of experience, right? Which is what you have for your friends, right? It's
100%.
like, if you're really, have this true isness with your friends, it's like if they have a win, you celebrate with them. You don't be like, oh, fuck that guy. Like that's not love.
Truly, I actually try to celebrate everybody's win.
Totally.
When I see someone drive by me in a Lamborghini and go, that asshole, I'm like, dude, badass.
Of course.
And whoa, that guy.
Unless he cuts you off.
That's awesome. If he cuts me off, I usually try to tell myself, well, he must have somewhere really important to go.
Yeah. Or
hopefully it's the hospital or somewhere and that someone's in trouble, because if he's just doing it to get to,
yeah, exactly.
he's just doing it to be an asshole. Well, that's a whole other thing. But I try not to take it personally.
Totally.
But, so you guys date, because I think this is interesting. I mean, we have a lot of different guys that are dads that are coming from a lot of different relationships, backgrounds, single dads. Yeah. Dads are doing it on their own. Dads with a mother is just completely out of the picture. Yeah. But you have this, you're cohabitating, you're co-parenting, you're dating, but, it hasn't got to the point where somebody's gotten close enough to come in.
Right, where we have to have that conversation.
Do you believe that, how long have you been doing the cohabitation kind of thing?
That happened just basically kind of maybe like a year into the COVID thing.
Okay.
So
it's pretty fresh still.
Long. Yeah.
Yeah, it's still pretty fresh.
Yeah. And even with that, like my initial agenda was to really repair and rebuild the idea of actually being that family, and that just wasn't where she was at, and like for me, I was like, well, maybe I can make it by being this person or like whatever excuse, and it just wasn't happening, and I had to really, some conflict was arising because I was sort of pushing for that. And she wasn't about it, and she wasn't really sure what she was about, but it's like what it required was for me to just let it go, and that's one of the things that I'm probably a master at is compartmentalization, of being able to just be like, oh, my bank account's totally empty and there's a bunch of bills piling up right now. All right, well, it'll get to it when I get to it. Like I'm done sweating over nonsense that I don't have any control over, and then when I get to it, I get to it. And that doesn't, that not everybody likes that, but it's like, I can't.
You're just putting it into a broader perspective.
Yeah. I just like, this is not stuff that I want to spend a bunch of time trying to manage or wrangle. And so it's like, I'm not about forcing the river. If you really like a no, then okay, let's just not push this. Like it's a big world, you know, and and I've always been like, and this is kind of the artist's thing, almost like a salvage artist, right? It's like, oh, this song has got some good parts, but all in all, it's not there, or this film or whatever this thing is. And like, so I've learned like kind of an editor, like across platform. It's like, let's find the gold and like, let's create a cohesive package of what this is and what works in this thing, and let's just toss out the rest and stop trying to pretend that it works. Right. And I think that's a big thing.
So you guys kept that gold in that relationship.
Yeah, which was the friendship too, and like that we were friends for years before we ever got intimate anyway.
Wow.
So we had a foundation of friendship.
Now, if you were to see her with another man,
which I have, yeah,
and you feel a sense of like, wow, I really hope I hope this guy is the one, or
Yeah.
how do you feel when that happens?
Well, that was an interesting experience fairly recently where, she went out with a guy and we had met him at this kind of circle, kind of spiritual gathering thing. And I met him. I thought he was cool. Him and I hit it off kind of as friends.
This is great.
And then he hits me up and asked me for her number. He's like, would you be cool with giving me your number? We had a great conversation. I'd like to reach out to her.
Yeah.
I'm like, totally, man. She's free,
Wow.
And so I forwarded, and then they went out, and it was, they had a great time. And then he kind of was very busy entrepreneur, father of multiple children, and just dropped the ball. And she's like, was just not in the mood to deal with like somebody who was inconsistent in their communication.
Yeah.
And kind of just shut him down pretty quick.
Wow.
And then I hung out with him, just kind of social level, and we went paddleboarding and stuff. And I was like, I don't know. I think you might have cut him off too early. I think he's a good dude.
Wow.
You might want to re-explore. She's like, really?
He's just busy.
I'm like, obviously it's a flaw. I mean, it wasn't like, it wasn't like
he
just
didn't
that.
communicate as perfectly as he could have.
Right. And apparently from what we understand, he might have a bit of a little pattern. But again, like, whatever. Everybody has their stuff,
Totally.
So it's like
this is so great. So you're advocating for this guy.
Totally. Yeah. One of my friends who's a therapist said, great relationships are often mutual neuroses or sort of, neuroses that kind of just fits well together.
Yeah.
But it is a form of neuroses. It's like your crazy has to work with my crazy.
Totally.
It's basically how he
That's
sort of
great.
phrased it. And so I was just like, yeah, I mean, I was like, and you guys kind of have the same stature and somewhat a similar look. You know how those couples are who like often they look like each other.
You're talking her into it.
Yeah. And, she never did anything with that, But I mean, part of it too is just like when you have big goals and visions and you're trying to create things in your life, and if you feel full in many ways, you're not that inclined to go hunting for it.
Totally.
But it's also just being mindful of like, okay, but are you resisting? Are you shutting things down that might make you happy, or that might be the next lesson in your exploration of yourself, or so yeah, I'm like, and this again, like sort of goes back to, the poly days, of you have to bring partners in who you trust to make sound decisions. Because the poly has become this thing that's just very flippant. It's flippant with people's emotions. It's, it's an excuse. And for me, when I discovered it, to me, it was a spiritual practice. It's like, oh, fuck, if I can utilize this to help move through what I feel are lower kind of vibrations energetically of like...
Right, like jealousy, possessiveness.
Yeah, control, trying to dominate your partner and control what they do with their life and all the insecurities that go along with that. And then like confront that. Like to me, that was worthwhile.
Yeah.
But then there's
It's a worthy pursuit.
Yeah.
If you could do it.
And then there's the practicalities of like actually living life like that. Right. And to me, I realized
there's medical, there's children, there's like
much,
all kinds of emotional stuff that's involved in all of that as well.
Totally. Yeah. And then like, how do you actually do that? Like to me, it's like, it wasn't going to happen. Like in my situation, I had partners who knew about each other, but didn't know each other, and they weren't going to they weren't going to be,
they didn't want to be buddies.
We're not going to, this is not going to be this like commune vibe,
Right.
And to me, like the only way that actually works just by nature of your time and your energy, and especially child rearing, is like everybody kind of has to be family. It's tribal.
Totally.
I mean, it really is this sort of
Right.
like, I mean, civilizations, cultures have been doing this forever, some iteration of that. Right. And they work fine. Right. Some of them matriarchal in nature anyway. But there's a container that allows that to work. So this is kind of what I harp on when I'm working with people too. It's like, you need to, if you're going to make these things work, not related to poly or any of these things, but like just life, it's like, you've got to create a container that works for you. Like if you want to be a good dad, you've got to create the container that helps you facilitate that instead of works against you. That might be, what you talk about, like scheduling, like how do you order your day, creating blocks, it's just like whatever those tactics or strategies that you want to impart, but you've got to have the willingness to examine the platform that you're trying to operate from, because it may be working against you. You may be swimming upstream just by nature of the environment that you're working in. So I'm a real environment advocate. It's like people are all stressed out just by living in an urban environment. Move out of the fucking urban environment. Like, really. Like, put yourself in that experience, even for a window of time. See how your body feels. See how your relationships blossom, how your relationship with yourself blossoms. If there's something in there for you, maybe it's time to reconfigure your lifestyle to accommodate that, because then you're not fighting the river. You know, you're just moving with the naturalness of your own experience, what your body is telling you, what your soul is telling you. And I think the biggest stuff that happens in terms of people's body, the health problems that we suffer, so much of that is a byproduct of the environments that we're in, not just the pollution or that kind of thing, but also the psychic
stress.
Pollution.
Yeah,
it's the
absolutely.
psychic pollution, right? And so you mitigate that first and foremost, and in doing that, you mitigate a whole host of other things, you know, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, you start to feel your nervous system re-regulating, you know, you're starting to feel your presence be more activated, right? Your isness, you know, and so I think, yeah, as a father, that if I can impart that into my son, that's why we spend so much time out in nature. I take him out hiking and biking all the time, you know.
Right. You know, what's interesting is there's this great principle in Adlerian psychology, which is that we cannot control another individual. Yeah. We can't change them, can't control them. But we can control the environment.
Sure.
And what's interesting is that when you change that environment, the individual changes. And
naturally.
So, you know, a lot of times, even like systems thinking, which is, you know, so much of what I love to look at is like, okay, obviously there's a flaw here because we keep getting this output.
Yeah.
What's the design flaw that I can work on? I think it was BJ Fogg that said, you know, it's not a character flaw if you keep having problems. It's a design flaw.
Right.
It's not something wrong with you per se. It's something wrong with your design of how you're setting up your system.
Yeah.
And with the kiddos, you know, when it comes to that environment change, and you're saying for as an adult, if you are stressed by the city, you're stressed by the traffic, you're stressed by, you know, well, now they have another, you know, maybe there's a political demonstration again. Oh my gosh, this is putting me in a high stress zone. Or for me, I live downtown, South by Southwest would happen. I was ready to get out of town because it would just change everything about my downtown area.
Totally.
So of course there was times when I would partake and enjoy South by Southwest, but there were a lot of times where we were like, hey, let's get the hell out of Dodge or rent the condo out. Yeah. Because it's not worth it to me. Yeah. You know, I know I'm going to just rack myself in the head with all the traffic or whatever. So while we give this advice to adults, hey, look, make the experience for yourself. Let's see, if you don't like how things are going, change your environment because actually you have control over your environment. Right. Even yourself, it's hard to change yourself. Right. But you can actually change your environment to work for you. Right. You know, if you're trying to quit something, get it out of the house. Yeah, exactly. Right? It's so stupid and simple.
It's so interesting too, because like a lot of people in the self-help world talk about Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, right? Yeah. And it's like, well, that's great, but you're not in a concentration camp, bro. Like you can actually change your environment. So like work with what you've got. It's like, I understand if you're in prison. Right. Like, and I feel that sometimes, just like even being in Austin, to me feels like prison sometimes. Like I don't want to be here, right? But so I do have to do that inner work and really reshape, but it's also like, and I am free, and I'm also choosing to be here for my son and not just bounce because I chose to bring him into the world. And so you just having that dialogue with yourself of essentially saying, okay, what are the tools at my disposal? Like how can I work with this? You know, for me, a lot of it was channeling that into renovating a house when we first got it. You know, it was like all that energy of like wanting to just get in a car and go was like channeled into transforming this kind of ghetto house into something really, really beautiful, and transforming the yard into something really beautiful, and then a shed into a really awesome man cave, you know? So it was like really channeling that energy into something productive. But it's like, but if you have the means, like take advantage of the means, you know, like nobody's got a noose around you, you know?
Well, and it's interesting is like, so this ability to change our environment, right? Which, you know, you went through all of these iterations of that, right? Like you went to all these different countries, you kept changing your
all the
environment
time.
over and over
and
over again.
really almost changing my sense of self, because you move into a new environment. It's like, well, who are you? And it's like, well, who do I want to be?
Exactly.
Nobody knows me here. I could be James Bond. I don't know, whatever. Like I could just pick my identity, and also you become like aware of like wherever you go, there you are.
Yep.
But it's also
you
like,
have that part of you that is that, it's kind of like it just stays. It's like the
essence, the
essence of you. Yeah.
Quality of you.
It's like the tide may rise and fall, but the pylon's still where it's at.
Yeah, totally. It's a good.
So it's cool too. Like with the kiddos. We can change their environment and have a shift in their response and how they're acting. And actually what I think we fail to see a lot of times is if we're, for example, feeling like, oh, I'm so flustered, or, oh, I feel so stressed, or I feel this way or that way, something as simple as cleaning your car.
Totally.
Something as simple as going and getting a haircut.
Yeah.
Something as simple as taking and getting your house just a little more organized, or taking a room and deciding to clear it out with some extra time.
Change your state.
It literally is such a small and simple thing that can have such a profound effect on how we feel about our life. We're like, oh, actually, this haircut was pretty good. I'm kind of liking having it cleaned up. And you know what? My car, the car just feels better. You can literally feel different about your life just by changing your environment and doing it in an intentional way. I think one of the first times you and I talked, it's like, you got these goals. Let's set our environment up to reflect our goals. Yeah. So it's telling us back, hey, I'm working on this. Mm-hmm. And so it's interesting how that can have such an effect. And it really is, I'm really impressed by you, by the way, with you and is it Chris?
Kriska.
Yeah, Kriska. By y'all's ability to bring your the small self that wants to be jealous, the small self that wants to be possessive, that small self that to say, hey, I'm going to be there for you, but you can't come in and interrupt this child's life.
Yeah.
For me, that is really impressive, man. I don't think I think it is, like I said earlier, uncommon, and it takes a lot of, I think, spiritual maturity, emotional maturity, to come in and be willing to do that for Miles and to create this house where he does have both his parents in the home, where they're not at each other's throats, where they're actually supporting what each other wants, to the degree that, and
advocating
I'm laughing,
for
you're advocating for another man, like going, I don't know, I think you cut him off a little early. Yeah. Like, that to me is so amazing.
Yeah, because I want her happiness, and I know that she wants my happiness, and and like that translates to Miles' happiness. So I'd rather see him with two parents who are with two other people or whatever that dynamic looks like, but happy and fulfilled, and not that that's where it comes from at all, but and as opposed to like two people who are just like tolerating each other or at each other's throats, or like, I just never, when I saw relationships like that as a kid, I just thought, why do people do this? This seems insane to me, and I didn't know what other ways, like it was either people were together or not together. And then like, if they weren't, if they were, just the hostility and the weird dynamics of like, who has control of what, and the child utilized as this sort of weapon against each other. I was just like, that's all bad. This is all bad stuff. I don't want any part of any of that stuff. And so I think those experiences early on for me, just again, seeds planted of like, no, I'm not going to create that. Like if I mean, even to the point of thinking like I'm going to have a kid, but at the point where I thought, I think this is my next phase of depth and meaning and transition and growth as an adult. I mean, I didn't really feel like a man until I had a kid.
Wow.
And honestly, like when I look at other...
You still felt like a boy?
Totally. Like Peter Pan. And honestly, when I look at other men, and then there's like the dad who's just like somehow been a dad all his life, whether he's got kids or not. And it's like, bro, you're 20 and you feel like you're 70. And I don't know what that's about. But like I see a lot of guys with a lot of hubris, and I'm like, I think you seem like a boy to me. Like I'm not feeling that, because it's like, until you take responsibility for another human being and like the weight of that person's life or death is on your shoulders, and soldiers get this, in certain situations. I mean, people get this without having progeny, without having kids, but a lot of people don't get that, and they puff themselves up thinking they've really got it dialed in. And it's like, man, you know, it's like the work is personal work so that you can prepare yourself for the dyad work or whatever that relational work is. It doesn't necessarily have to equate to a dyad, but the relational work with another human being. And then you get that really good. You think you've got that dialed in. And then it's like, and then you bring a child into this situation. You're like, oh, I feel like I'm starting over again. All right, here we go, which is great.
And they go through all their phases.
And then you're like with them on all of their phases and you're learning through them. So it's just like, you know, it is this never ending sense. And I think that's how it should be, of this rediscovery and reemergence. It's like, you know, the what do you call it? The caterpillar into the butterfly, but like throughout your entire life, you know, it's like, oh, cocoon again, another butterfly, and go back into the cocoon and become some other iteration, you know. So I feel like the more we can embrace that, I mean, that's the takeaway ultimately. It's like we are more like a flickering flame than we are some kind of iconic, stable sense of, you know, sense of self. It's like we allow ourselves to be this amorphous thing. The richness that can be extracted from life is exponentially higher than creating this artifice of who we are and then trying to defend that from the world. No, really, we are that. And it's like, but you weren't in integrity with this.
Right.
No, yes, I was, you know, and then it's defending. It's like, you know, own it all. Like own your inner, as a man, own your inner monster, because like only in owning it can you tame it. You try and be, you know, trying to push it off or pretend that's not you, you're going to project that. And we see this on a societal level right now, how much projection is taking place because people aren't owning their shadow, you know, and that's the biggest thing. Like, you know, it's like Miles, my kid, it's like, you know, he does things and he'll look at me like thinking there's going to be some backlash. And I'm just like, whatever, dude. And I have to work on like certain little things, would just be like, will it be a backlash that like, he's like, you know,
he's
shouldn't
shocked.
be. Yeah, he's shocked at the backlash.
He's like, wait, you're upset about this?
Yeah, exactly. Which is,
It's like the contrast here is a little
I
tough,
know, but it's
Dad.
like some big thing, and I'm like, I just destroyed this. It's cool.
Well, it is interesting. We are so dynamic. You know, I think about some people say the greatest question is, who am I? And I think that's a great question, but when are you asking it?
Yeah, exactly.
Because every time I answer that question, it's going to be different.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't say, who am I? I mean, if you wanted to go to the deep, who am I?
Yeah.
You know, well, we're the infinite. We're beyond who we are as individuals. Yeah, we are something. We're part of something way larger. Yeah. But then that's not the I. I mean, it's the ultimate I.
Right. Yeah.
It's not that I as in, who am I as this little individual.
The capital I.
Yeah.
Or the Nisargadatta said, like, ask him who are you? And he's like, nothing conceivable or perceivable, I think is what he said.
Right. I mean, it's like, you know, Einstein said it was like, you know, people think of him as intelligent, but he feels like a child in a library with a flashlight that's all dark. Yeah. He can see this part. Yeah. Because no idea all this vastness, and he can only see as far as the flashlight can show him. Totally. And it's like, you know, I really think that's part of the journey, is the dynamic nature of us evolving, of us becoming. But, you know, I just want to say this before I forget. I want to honor you guys because I really do believe, like, you know, you're at another level of emotional maturity with you guys. And I know whatever's coming, whatever you're both co-creating in this, you know, that y'all calling in your partner that's more your intimate partner, that communal space that you guys are working towards, that life that you're creating for Miles, it's going to be such a beautiful thing. I feel honored to even be able to witness what that is. And I really just think that you guys are breaking the mold.
Thank you.
And so I really honor you guys in that.
That means a lot. Yeah. I feel like one of the things that I've always wanted my life to be is an inspiration for how things should be.
You're definitely a color outside the lines kind of guy, because why are these lines this way?
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
I love that. I love you're changing the design and the architecture of even down to the household experience. And thank you. Yeah, and
you're doing it. It's not without its challenges, but I feel like when you feel that, and I've had a hard time, you know, as somebody who's ADD and always thinking about different things to find the through line of this, but it is this sense of like, we can do this better, all of it. Like I'm born into a little shabby town, and I'm just like, what is this? This is the apex of human, and then you go to Europe and you're like, oh, wow, this is how it used to be, and you see these great things that humans have achieved. And my realization is like, we are not, people say, oh, everybody's doing their best. Maybe. I don't know if I totally agree with that. I know I'm not always doing my best. As a father, I think I really pursue that goal. But part of that is like, when I'm not clear about the end result, I'm just like, what am I doing? But for me, the through line is this, like, we can do this better. And there's a lot of this to be attended to. So what you have to get to the root of, like, okay, this is the tree that we have allowed to blossom because of the seeds we have planted. This is the fruit that we are getting, right? What other fruit do we actually want? That requires planting a different seed. What does that seed look like? That means from the ground up, creating a container for humans to develop in that is different fundamentally than the container we have all grown up in.
Right.
Right? And that's a big ask.
Yeah, it is.
But like for me, it's like that I realize is the through line.
It's like a worthy pursuit. It's like give it a new container
for all of it,
for it to grow.
Yeah, it's like, because what could we do with a bunch of healthy? I mean, this is why we try to raise our children like we are standing on the shoulders of giants, right? It's like I want to raise my kid so that he has the minimal amount of therapy bills that he has to
right.
attend to, like that he is like healthy and whole and self-referential and humble and in service and in love. And I know that's a lot, and I'm not trying to put that on him, but it's like I want to create the container that facilitates that so that when he goes out into the world, he can just get after it, whatever the it is for him. He can just get after it and not have to unravel all of this trauma that has been introduced through his life. Minimize that. Life is traumatic enough without unconscious people adding to it, right? So
I think you guys are doing that. Thank you, Jon. This has been really a pleasure, and I know that we'll have you on again.
Yeah, right.
We're going to do a lot more of this.
We'll do more of this.
But this has been so awesome. Anything you want to wrap up with, or anything that you feel like, anything you have on your heart you want to?
Well, man, we can go on and on. But I will say people are interested in intentional community and the idea of doing things different, like I've spoken about. I have a website called Akasha. It's AKASHA communities.com. And then I also have JonProphet, JonProphet.com. So you can go there and see the artwork that I do, see the music that I've done, the new songs that I'm working on, some of the films that I've worked on, and things like that. So that's just kind of a catch-all for a lot of the creative stuff that I've done, and some of the programs that I do around creativity and utilizing that as a form of therapy and things like that. So yeah.
Epic.
Thanks.
Thank you, man. Thanks
Peace.
for being on. Peace, brother.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you've received some value from it, please share it with other dads and consider leaving us a review on your favorite podcast platform, and we'll see you in the next episode. Looking for support with your fatherhood journey? Go to bedadly.com and take our Dadly Disposition quiz and learn helpful insights on how you can overcome power struggles with your kids.